For centuries, we've explored the pyramids from the outside, but now brand new evidence suggests that they're nothing like we thought. Everything that we know about these magnificent ancient structures is just the tip of the iceberg, or in this case, the tip of the pyramid. Researchers are believed to have uncovered massive underground structures stretching over a mile beneath the surface, undocumented, unexplained, and possibly untouched for thousands of years. And as a Christian, I find discoveries like this fascinating, not only because of what they reveal about ancient Egypt, but because they help to answer deeper questions about who we are and what we're ultimately searching for. And if what they found is what it appears to be, then it forces us to rethink what it really means to live and what it means to die. Alright, so in order to understand why this discovery is so significant, you first have to understand why these pyramids were built in the first place. You see, the ancient Egyptians had a goal of going to the field of reeds after death, which was basically their concept of heaven. But what's interesting about the field of reeds is that it was basically a mirrored but perfected version of Egypt with lush landscapes, abundant harvests, and the promise of eternal peace. But here's the thing, getting there wasn't guaranteed. To reach it, if you lived a good enough life, at death, your body had to be preserved, your tomb had to be secure, and your soul had to be fully equipped for a long and dangerous journey ahead. So if your body decayed or if your tomb was disturbed, then your soul could be lost forever. And that's why these tombs weren't just graves, they were launch pads for immortality. So the journey wasn't an easy one. In fact, death was just the beginning of a long and dangerous passage. Pharaohs were buried with everything that they might need: gold, food, weapons, boots, and even servants, sometimes real and sometimes statues meant to serve eternally. And these weren't just symbolic gestures, they were practical preparations for eternity. Most Egyptologists believe this is why the pyramids were built, to protect everything. Multiple layers of stone, hidden chambers, decoyed paths, and maybe even booby traps. Anything to keep the pharaoh's body untouched. And these tombs were called houses of eternity, believed to hold the power to restore and grant them immortality. But in the end, it didn't work. We found their tombs, their bodies still there. Their tombs were sealed, which means their gods never came, and their attempt to defeat death ended in silence. But maybe the real secret isn't in what they buried, but in what they built beneath the pyramids. And that's where these new discoveries kick in. Because of how incredibly complex the internal structures are to these pyramids and the countless hidden rooms and doors that we still haven't discovered, a team of Italian and Scottish researchers in 2023 decided to use advanced radar technology to scan the Giza pyramids. However, not only did they discover hidden areas inside of the pyramids that we had no idea about, but the scan of the Giza plateau allegedly revealed something incredible beneath these pyramids. What they're said to have found is absolutely staggering, and it looks something like this. They apparently found 8 gigantic cylinders underneath all 3 pyramids with what appears to be some sort of coils that are going around them, and they go over a mile deep into the ground. So to put this in a perspective, that's about 7 American football fields stacked vertically on top of each other deep. Or another way to think about it, it's nearly 7 times the height of the Statue of Liberty underground. And even more importantly, at the bottom of these shafts, they found signs of 2 absolutely massive cube-shaped chambers, each one about the size of a soccer field. Surrounding those chambers was something even stranger. It's what appears to be a vast network of tunnels and voids. Now, to be clear, these findings are still controversial. The research hasn't gone through full peer review yet, and some archaeologists and scientists remain pretty skeptical. According to a radar expert at the University of Denver, he believes that these findings could be a huge exaggeration, saying that the technology that was used can't even go that deep into the ground, and that the only way for us to confirm these structures is for us to do targeted digs in that area. And then, on the other hand, you have several people that disagree with them, and so on. However, all of this raises an even bigger question. If real, why would these ancient Egyptians build something so massive and yet hide it beneath the ground? And what are these things? Well, some have long speculated that these pyramids were energy generators, echoing ideas once proposed by Nikola Tesla, so they believe that these structures were created to generate usable energy. Others believe that these structures served mechanical purposes or were designed to stabilize the massive 6 million ton pyramids above. And of course, some people believe that they were created by aliens, and others think that it could be an entrance to an ancient library, one that preserved the lost knowledge of their civilization. So until we do targeted digs, no one really knows. But what we do know is that the Egyptians went through extreme lengths not only to preserve the body, but to preserve a hope that death could be escaped and they could live forever. Thousands of years later, we're also scrambling for ways to delay or escape death ourselves. Everything from cryogenic freezing to anti-aging science to biohacking and vitamin stacks, it's all the same pattern. Humans have always longed to live forever, but despite their efforts, no one has been able to prove the ability to live forever. Well, except for one man who broke this pattern. Until him, every king, every pharaoh, and every other human that claimed to know how to beat death stayed dead. They could not offer any real evidence, and more importantly, they couldn't even raise themselves from the dead. But then came Jesus, and unlike anyone else in history, he didn't just make promises about life after death, he proved them. According to some of our earliest historical sources, about 2,000 years ago, Jesus rose from the dead. And no, this wasn't a legend that was developed over centuries. In fact, historians, regardless of their religious beliefs, virtually all agree on several core facts surrounding the resurrection of Jesus. Two that are most relevant here is that Jesus was crucified under Pontius Pilate, so he died. And the other is the fact that people, including his closest followers, genuinely believed that they had seen him alive again after his death, and spent several days with him. As the non-Christian historian Paula Fredrickson put it, I know in their own terms what they saw was the raised Jesus. That's what they say, and then all the historic evidence we have afterwards attests to their conviction that that's what they saw. I'm not saying that they really did see the raised Jesus. I wasn't there. I don't know what they saw. But I do know that, as a historian, they must have seen something. And in addition, we see this reflected in sources like 1 Corinthians 15, where scholars date to just a few years after Jesus' death, which preserves even earlier traditions that go back to within months of the crucifixion. And in that passage, Paul lists eyewitnesses by name, people who were still alive and could be questioned. The location of the tomb was known, it was publicly accessible, and yet it was found empty. But perhaps even more compelling is what happened next. The disciples, who abandoned Jesus when he was crucified out of fear that they would also be killed, suddenly became bold after claiming to have seen the raised Jesus. They publicly preached that he had risen, even if it meant suffering, imprisonment, or death. In other words, Jesus didn't just say he knew how you could have eternal life, he backed it up. He rose from the dead as evidence for his claims, and that everyone who trusts in him will be raised one day, just as he was raised. And the most incredible part is that he offers eternal life as a free and undeserved gift, freely given to those who receive it by faith. So here's the point. Jesus didn't build a monument to preserve his legacy. He didn't need a tomb filled with gold. In fact, the one thing he left behind was the tomb itself. The Egyptians, on the other hand, built tombs to preserve their kings and honor their gods, hoping that they could hold on to life just a little bit longer. But in Christianity, unlike these pharaohs, Jesus didn't stay in the tomb. He walked out of it to offer us the very thing that we're all searching for. Eternal life, which isn't something that we achieve or protect, is something Jesus secured for us, once and for all. Now, if you want more sources on the historical evidence for the resurrection, I've linked some down below in the description. And thank you so much for watching this video until the end. It really does help us. Go ahead and hit the like button if you enjoyed this video, and then check out the video on the screen that YouTube's algorithm thinks that you'll like. Let's see if they're right. All right, see you guys next time.